At 4:42 on a rainy Saturday afternoon, a man opens his closet to look for a black sweater and finds 8 of them. Not one perfect black sweater, and 7 completely different pieces. 8 versions of roughly the same idea. Slightly different necklines, slightly different weights. 2 he forgot he owned, one with the tag still attached. One that fit better 3 years ago. One he bought because it was on sale. One he bought because he was sure he needed a better one. One he bought because he was stressed and wandering through a store felt easier than going home. He stands there for a second, hanger in hand, staring at his own buying history as if it belongs to someone else. That is the moment numbers can change a life. Because people do not usually change the way they spend when they hear abstract advice. Spend less. Be mindful. Stop impulse buying. Avoid clutter. Save more. All of that sounds reasonable, and most of it evaporates on contact with real life. But something different happens when a vague category becomes a count. 8 black sweaters, 17 pairs of shoes, 143 unread books, 12 spatulas, 14 coffee mugs when only 3 ever seem to be in rotation. A kitchen drawer so full of gadgets that finding the one you actually use has become a small excavation project. Numbers do something emotion alone cannot do. They remove the blur. That is why counting your clothes, shoes, books, and kitchen gadgets can completely change the way you spend money. Not because counting is magical, because counting turns lifestyle fog into inventory. And once your life becomes inventory, it gets much harder to keep lying to yourself. Most people do not buy inside reality. They buy inside feeling unprepared, feeling bored, feeling behind, feeling like they need a better version of something, feeling like they do not have enough, even when what they actually have is invisible only because it has never been measured. That invisibility matters more than it seems. A person can walk through their home every day and still have almost no real sense of what is in it. Not because they are careless. Because the human brain is bad at perceiving abundance when abundance is scattered. 3 sweaters in one closet section, 5 more folded somewhere else, 2 pairs of shoes by the door, 4 in the bedroom, 5 in boxes, 3 shoved beneath a bench, books on shelves, nightstands, desks, the floor beside the bed, and 3 arriving next week because buying books and reading books are often 2 very different hobbies. Gadgets in drawers, cabinets, baskets, bins, and the back corners of shelves where good intentions go to become dust. When ownership is dispersed, the mind experiences it not as enough but as maybe not enough. That is expensive. Because uncertainty is one of the most profitable emotions in consumer life. If you are not fully sure what you own, then every new purchase can pretend to be useful. Every sale can pretend to fill a gap. Every improved version can present itself as the missing answer to a problem that may have already been solved 3 times in your own house. Counting destroys that illusion with humiliating speed. You count your jeans and discover you do not need more denim. You count your mugs and realize you are running a small ceramic population. You count your unread books, and suddenly that next bookstore trip starts looking less like intellectual ambition and more like decorative optimism. You count your kitchen tools and understand, maybe for the first time, that the issue in your home is not lack. It is saturation. That shift is deeper than it sounds. Because most bad spending happens under the influence of imagined scarcity. I do not really have enough work shirts. I could use a better pair of sneakers. I should buy more books so I keep reading. I need a few things for the kitchen. These sentences feel harmless until numbers arrive. Then they become testable. Do you not have enough work shirts? Or do you have 19 shirts and only wear 6 because those 6 are the only ones you actually like? Do you need better sneakers? Or are there already 5 pairs in rotation because buying shoes feels more satisfying than admitting which ones you never really wanted? Do you need more books, or have you been buying identity rather than reading material? Do you need another kitchen gadget, or are you just responding to the fantasy that this one tool will transform the way you cook, when the real issue is that you already own too many specialized things to use comfortably? Counting does not merely answer those questions. It changes the emotional tone around them. A maybe becomes a number. A desire meets evidence. A purchase idea has to walk into a room full of witnesses. That is why counting categories is so effective. It forces your money decisions to stop floating in abstraction. Take clothes first, because clothing is one of the most emotionally loaded categories people own. Clothes are not just fabric. They are identity, possibility, mood, status, aspiration, self-correction, fantasy, and sometimes comfort in the purest sense. That makes them easy to buy and hard to evaluate clearly. But when you count them, something surprising happens. The category splits open. You begin to see not only how many clothes you own, but how many versions of yourself you have been trying to maintain. The professional self, the relaxed self, the more stylish self, the future thinner self, the gym self, the elegant dinner self, the person who wears bright colors, the person who finally learns how to dress well, the person who is always ready for the perfect event that rarely happens. Without numbers, all of those identities can coexist quietly in hangers and drawers, each one making a future purchase feel justified. With numbers, the pattern becomes embarrassing in a useful way. 32 tops, but you reach for the same 7. 9 jackets, but 2 do almost all the work. A drawer of workout clothes that says you are preparing for a lifestyle your calendar has not agreed to. At that point, spending changes, because the next purchase is no longer arriving into an abstract wardrobe. It is arriving into a counted system. You do not think this shirt is only $40. You think this would become shirt number 27, and I already ignore at least half of the shirts I own. That is a very different feeling. Shoes create a similar effect, but often with even more force because shoes are easy to romanticize. People buy for comfort, fashion, identity, fantasy travel, imagined routines, aspirational fitness, weather scenarios, and sudden bursts of self-reinvention. A single pair rarely looks dramatic. But when counted, the category often tells a more honest story. 12 pairs, but you wear 3. 2 painful pairs kept because they were expensive. 3 pairs purchased because they looked good online and now live mostly in darkness. A pair for running even though you do not run. 2 nearly identical pairs because one was discounted, and the discount itself felt persuasive enough. When that total becomes visible, spending changes because your mind can no longer pretend each new pair enters a vacuum. It enters a crowded room. Books may be the most psychologically interesting category of all, because people often buy books with the purest intentions. Books feel educational, serious, enriching, noble. Buying a book can feel like buying intelligence, growth, future discipline, or a better inner life. That makes book accumulation especially easy to excuse. But count them, especially the unread ones, and the emotional chemistry shifts. An unread shelf is no longer a romantic picture of possibility. It is also a measurable backlog, a stack of promises to yourself, a queue of attention you have already purchased and not yet honored. And once that queue has a number attached to it, every new purchase enters under different lighting. The next book is no longer just $19. It is book number 144 in a line waiting for time you keep pretending will appear automatically. This does not mean buying books is bad. It means counting restores honesty. It separates actual reading from aspirational collecting. It helps you see whether you are feeding a practice or feeding an identity. Those are not the same thing, and they produce very different financial outcomes. Kitchen gadgets create yet another kind of clarity. Almost everyone has at least one drawer or cabinet containing objects bought in moments of culinary optimism. Specialty slicers, small machines, clever peelers, containers designed for fruits you do not regularly buy, tools for recipes made once, devices that promised speed, health, organization, creativity, or efficiency, and now mostly occupy cubic inches. This category is powerful because kitchen purchases often disguise themselves as responsible. The story sounds smart. This will help me cook more. This will save money in the long run. This will make meal prep easier. Sometimes that is true. Often it is theory wearing an apron. Count the gadgets, though, and their practical halo starts to dim. When you realize you own 4 different ways to chop, peel, press, blend, or store something, the next clever gadget loses some of its charm, not because gadgets are evil, because the count proves the problem was never a lack of tools. It was a mismatch between shopping energy and actual daily behavior. That is the first big reason counting changes spending. It exposes category saturation. The second reason is even more important. Counting reveals duplication. People rarely feel the financial weight of duplicates because each duplicate looks small and ordinary. Another black t-shirt, another pair of white sneakers, another chef's knife, another notebook, another wooden spoon, another tote bag, another water bottle, another measuring cup set because the old one was buried somewhere and buying a new one felt easier than searching. Duplicates thrive in uncounted environments. They survive because nothing is visible enough to challenge them. But once a category gets counted, duplication becomes undeniable. 10 pairs of black socks may be practical. 10 nearly identical beige sweaters are a different story. 2 can openers may be harmless. 4. Start asking questions. Once you see duplication clearly, your spending changes for a simple reason. Novelty no longer hides inside similarity. The new item is not a standalone choice anymore. It is the fifth version of something already present. The brain experiences that differently. The purchase stops feeling like provision and starts feeling like repetition. The third reason counting is powerful is that it creates friction, and friction is one of the most underrated tools in personal finance. People think better money behavior comes from stronger discipline. More often it comes from a better pause. If buying can happen inside a vague emotional fog, it usually will. But if the purchase idea has to pass through a remembered number, the momentum changes. You are standing in a store looking at a mug, and somewhere in your mind is the number 14. You are browsing shoes online, and somewhere in your mind is the number 17. You are adding a book to a cart, and somewhere in your mind is the number 83 unread. That number becomes a speed bump. It is not guilt, exactly. It is awareness. And awareness slows the hand. That pause is enough to kill a surprising number of unnecessary purchases. Midway through this, it helps to reframe the whole topic. Counting is not really about arithmetic. It is about converting possessions from atmosphere into data. Before counting, your home is a mood. After counting, it becomes evidence. That evidence changes how money feels. A purchase no longer arrives as a pleasant idea. It arrives as an addition to a known total. That is a radical shift, because accumulation depends on categories staying emotionally soft around the edges. Once edges become visible, decisions harden. And this leads to another important effect. Counting improves gratitude and dissatisfaction at the same time. It improves gratitude because many people realize they already own far more than their daily life can fully use. The count can be sobering in a generous way. Not miserable, not shame-filled. Just clarifying. I have enough shirts, I have enough shoes, I have enough unread books for the next year, I have enough kitchen tools to cook almost anything I actually cook. That kind of realization cools the nervous system. But counting also improves dissatisfaction, specifically with the right things. It helps you become dissatisfied with excess, with duplication, with passive ownership, with the gap between what you buy and what you use. That kind of dissatisfaction is healthy. It redirects attention from acquiring more to using better. And once spending turns toward use rather than accumulation, the whole economy of a home begins to change. You stop asking, what else do I want? You start asking, what do I already have that is not being fully lived with? That question is cheaper. It is also smarter. There is another powerful reason counting changes behavior. It exposes the difference between access and ownership. Many people buy as if every category needs endless variation to feel complete. But when counted, you often discover that your real life uses only a narrow band of what you own. A handful of outfits, a few pairs of shoes, a small fraction of the books. 3 or 4 kitchen tools doing most of the work while the rest watch from the sidelines. That means you were never lacking access. You are drowning it in excess ownership. Once you understand that, the future purchases start to look different. The issue is no longer how to expand the category, it is how to reduce confusion inside it. That alone changes spending, because the fantasy of more options loses its innocence. More options often mean more noise, more storage, more cleaning, more indecision, and less appreciation of the truly useful things already present. Counting also changes spending because it puts a quiet price tag on space. 35 books need shelves, 22 pairs of shoes need storage. 48 clothing items in one category need hangers, drawer room, closet room, and visual room. 15 kitchen gadgets need cabinets, counters, drawers, or boxes. When numbers go up, square footage gets claimed. That claim is not free. It costs in rent or mortgage, in storage furniture, in attention, in the little stress of living among too much. A person who counts often begins to spend differently because they finally see purchases not as isolated objects, but as members of a growing population. Every population needs habitat. That realization is subtle but powerful. It is one thing to buy a blender. It is another to realize this is kitchen gadget number 26, in a room that already feels tight. One purchase feels harmless. The population count makes it structural. Then there is the effect counting has on fantasy selves. This may be the deepest change of all. A lot of spending is not about what serves your current life. It is about what serves a future identity you hope to inhabit. Counting challenges that by confronting you with what previous fantasy selves have already purchased. The painter version of you bought supplies. The athlete version bought gear. The serious reader version bought stacks. The elegant host version bought entertaining pieces. The organized home chef version bought tools. The minimalist who somehow still shops for containers bought bins for the clutter the previous identities created. Once those categories have totals, the pattern becomes visible. You realize you have not failed to become these people because you lacked equipment. You have often already bought the equipment. What was missing was not the object, it was the life around it. That changes spending because the next fantasy purchase starts sounding repetitive. You have heard this story before. You already own its props. That recognition can be almost startling. It makes you harder to sell to. And being hard to sell to is an underrated financial skill. Now imagine what happens when counting becomes a habit rather than a one-time shock. You do not need to live in constant inventory mode, but if you periodically count key categories, your relationship with money sharpens. You become aware of inflow before categories silently bloat again. You notice when shoes creep upward, when unread books start stacking faster than reading time, when kitchen tools begin multiplying under the influence of content, trends, and convenience fantasies. You catch expansion early. That is how people stop lifestyle clutter before it becomes lifestyle overhead. Because that is what uncounted accumulation eventually becomes: overhead. More to store, more to manage, more to clean, more to remember, more to justify. It is not just a spending problem. It becomes a living problem, and the person who counts sees that sooner. Go back to the closet from the beginning. The man looking for a black sweater did not really discover he owned 8 sweaters that day. He discovered something more useful. He discovered that his spending had been happening in the absence of visible truth. The sweaters were not merely sweaters. They were 8 pieces of evidence that wanting had outrun awareness. That is why counting can change the way you spend money so completely. It does not motivate you with fear. It educates you with reality. It turns categories into numbers, numbers into perspective, and perspective into restraint that feels earned rather than forced. You stop buying because you feel like you should be more disciplined. Now you start buying less because the next edition simply no longer makes sense inside a counted life. That is a far more durable form of control, because once you know you own 8 black sweaters, 17 pairs of shoes, 83 unread books, and enough kitchen gadgets to outfit a small cooking show, a surprising thing happens. The store gets quieter. The sale gets less convincing. The urge meets a number and loses some of its poetry. And in the gap between desire and purchase, money finally gets a chance to stay where it is.